Hey guys, I hope you're doing well. In today's video, I'm going to go over the top 5 reasons to get into the expanded universe and why I think it's better than the canon timeline. Now for those of you who follow this channel, this video might not seem super necessary. After all, you follow the channel so you're already sort of into the expanded universe. Hopefully this video will encourage you to dive deeper than you already are. For those of you who are new, welcome. I hope this video helps you get into the expanded universe. Now just a side note, as I was going over some of the reasons kind of overlap and feel similar, but for the most part these are 5 separate reasons. Before I get into the list, let's go over what the expanded universe is. The expanded universe, also known as Star Wars Legends, describes the decanonized Star Wars novels, comics, and video games that came out before 2014. On April 25th, 2014, Disney announced that they were going to decanonize the expanded universe so that they could work on the sequel trilogy. And in their words, they wanted to give the writers and directors as much creative freedom as possible. As a result, they decanonized the current universe minus the 6 movies and the Clone Wars show, and essentially started from scratch. Now that you have a better understanding of what the expanded universe is, let's explore the reasons that you should get into it. Now there are tons and tons of reasons to get into the EU, but today I'll be talking about these 5. Reason number 1, it does justice to legacy characters. Now this is a very obvious one, and it's a huge reason many people enjoy Legends. Out of the 3 Legends characters, Luke, Han, and Leia, Luke Skywalker was probably done the dirtiest. Rian Johnson wanted to subvert expectations, whatever that means. Instead of making him the heroic, brave, and confident character that we know and love, he was made to be a pathetic, weak, crotchety old loser. Consider my expectations subverted, Ryan. In Legends, Luke is an amazing character. His character growth and his story are actually pretty inspirational. Unlike the Jedi before him, he's willing to admit when he's wrong and change for the better. He doesn't just blindly follow 1,000-year-old rules because it's tradition. He adapts and he grows. He also has a beautiful love story with Mara Jade, which to me is so enjoyable to read. Other characters like Han and Leia grow so much throughout the course of the novels as well. Han, while still keeping the same personality, becomes a heroic war hero and eventually an amazing father. Han and Leia's relationship is arguably one of the best love stories in all of fiction. As Han and Leia encounter loss, tragedy, and peril, they grow closer, not apart like in canon. It's honestly inspirational. Seeing the OG characters as sad, worn-out old losers doesn't inspire the hope that it should. And for many, it makes watching the original trilogy hard because you know what they become. In Legends, I can enjoy watching the original trilogy because I know what they will all grow into one day. That's reason number 1. Reason number 2, continuity. Now what do I mean by this? One of the things that frustrated me back when I was a Disney canon fan when it came to TV shows, comics, and games was that not everything aligned. It felt like they all took place in 3 or 4 separate universes. For example, in issue 1 of the Age of Rebellion comics, Yoda vows never to make another lightsaber. Now in the Book of Boba Fett, episode 6, Luke Skywalker gives him a lightsaber that belonged to Yoda. The explanation we get from Matt Martin, Lucasfilm's manager of digital content and community relations, is that Yoda simply built another one, which contradicts the comic. It makes it feel like reading the comic isn't necessary or worth your while. It's less important. There are dozens more examples of this in canon, which is frustrating and makes the timeline less sacred, so to speak. In the EU, despite what you may have heard, writers are so careful to keep continuity. This also helps the stories connect much more. For example, events and things that happened 4,000 years before the Battle of Yavin can be referenced in Luke Skywalker's era. We see this with the ancient Sith Exar Kun, a character from the comics who showed up in the Jedi Academy trilogy 4,000 years later. That level of connectivity makes the expanded universe timeline so special. Everything is important and treated with respect. We also see this with the novel Rogue Planet, where Anakin and Obi-Wan investigate a mysterious sentient planet. This same planet, Zonoma Sika, plays a pivotal part in the Yuuzhan Vong invasion many years later. There are so many examples of this in the expanded universe, but you get the point. Now why is this so important? In my opinion, having a long-lasting continuity like the one in the expanded universe that spans well over 5,000 years, that connects and almost feels like it's telling the same story, makes it all interesting and worth getting into. Ever since the beginning, the writers of the expanded universe have been very careful not to make mistakes when it comes to continuity and story. Now of course, there have been the occasional mistakes, but most of them come from the Clone Wars TV show, which is debatably not part of the expanded universe timeline anyway. Reason number 3, it adds to George Lucas's Star Wars. What do I mean by that? Obviously, any extra Star Wars content adds to George Lucas's Star Wars. What I'm saying is it adds incredible depth to characters he created, which I talked about earlier. For example, books like the Plagueis novel made Palpatine seem so much more of an interesting and evil character than he already was. I love Revenge of the Sith, and he's an extremely fascinating character in the prequels, but getting his backstory in the Plagueis novel made the movie so much more interesting. Another example of this is the Mortis arc in the Clone Wars. Now while I don't necessarily hate that arc, it was kinda weird and confusing and left me with more questions than answers. In the Fate of the Jedi series, we get a much closer look into who they are and their backstory, which makes what George Lucas created even better. The EU also did a great job of explaining inconsistencies or plot holes that the movies may not have had time to explain. For example, many people thought that it was odd that once the Death Star blew up, all the Imperial Star Destroyers stopped fighting the rebels. I made a video talking about it, but in the first novel in the Thrawn trilogy, Heir to the Empire, Admiral Pelion, who is at the battle, gives us an explanation as to why the rest of the Imperial army wasn't a threat after the Death Star was blown up. The explanation we get is that the Super Star Destroyer that you see get destroyed had most of the leadership for the Empire on it, and after Palpatine died, it was absolute chaos because they had no leadership, so they all panicked and eventually started to flee, which is why they weren't a threat to the Rebel Alliance. There, all of a sudden, a plot hole that was fixed thanks to the expanded universe, which in my opinion adds to George Lucas' Star Wars and improves it. Reason number 4. It has so many cool original characters. One of the great things about the expanded universe is that legacy characters like Han, Luke, and Leia get so much added to their characters. However, sometimes you want stories and characters that feel different, fresh, and new. The EU has so many cool characters that are exactly that. Completely original characters like Revan, Jaina and Jacen Solo, Kyle Katarn, Nomi Sunrider, Malgus, just to name a few. Using Revan as an example, Revan, who was created for the game Knights of the Old Republic, is personally my second favorite Star Wars character. As someone who's been a fan of the movies for many years, it was cool to get a completely new yet amazing character like him. His story and costume felt so cool and original, while still fitting in with the same Star Wars themes that we've come to know and love. Now, I'm not saying that I don't want to read about Luke, Han, and Leia. However, sometimes it's nice to change things up a bit with new characters. Reason number 5. There's so much. Now, this is a little unfair because canon is only 9 years old, and admittedly, there's a decent amount of canon novels and comics to read. But if you wanted to read/watch canon content at a steady pace, you could finish it in maybe a year and a half. Now, everyone is different. Some people read faster than others, obviously. But the expanded universe has so much content because it was worked on for so long. If you decide to get into Legends, there's so much for you to explore and read, and it will take you forever to finish it, which may seem daunting to some, but personally I absolutely love that. It's such a fun hobby to have, and having tons of content makes it feel worthwhile to get into. So I know I just said a lot, and if you're still watching, I want to thank you. To summarize what I just said, the 5 reasons to get into the expanded universe are: it treats legacy characters with respect and adds to their story. The EU writers did a phenomenal job with continuity and creating a consistent story. They added to George Lucas's work and made what he created better. It added unique and well-written characters, and there's so much to explore. So why not get into the EU? I'm going to eventually one day make a video talking about where to start in the EU, but for now just start with the Thrawn trilogy and do research to figure out where to go from there. Thank you all for watching, and may the Force be with you.